So Rob, or RVJ, has just brought out a video discussing the use of steroids and the abuse of steroids and PEDs in the sport of arm wrestling. Of course, this is not limited to arm wrestling alone. It is an entire endemic phenomena across all domains. But his main points, as I understood, were that the use of steroids is eroding the classic, hard-working and natural process which he believes that athletes should go through on pursuit of becoming the best, and that steroids, when used, give easy flash-in-the-pan results that, although they work very well to bring a person up to a high level, fall away just as easily as they came about. And he references Arsène Liliev as an example, showing that he was big and strong at the beginning, but now he is shriveled away and there's not much left of him. And these are all fine points and a little more personal preference than anything objective, but they are still fine and valid. But the larger issue that I see is the creeping mindset that steroids are bringing to sports and fitness and the general population. In the 80s and 90s, steroids and PEDs in general were almost exclusively underground material. You had to be in the right clubs to access them, either really hardcore gym goers like pro bodybuilders or powerlifters, or pro athletes in other sports. But otherwise they were mostly unknown to people outside of these groups. But since then the trajectory has almost exponentially exploded. Slowly at first, and then around the early 2000s, PEDs were more talked about in general gyms, usually with people ridiculing them or shaming people who had or did use them. But then with the internet becoming a thing, discussions took place for all people to see. You had message boards with the IFBB pros and other hardcore athletes discussing their methods and methodologies. And then other people could see those messages, both newbies and suppliers. So you got this escalation and dispersion of information from this reclusive enclave, and then it spread to everybody with Google. But still then you had to go and look for information to find it. If you had no interest, you were unlikely to hear about the topic. People realized that the topic was taboo and it brought in views because nobody knew or talked about it except for these specific groups of people. It was mysterious and hidden in the shadows. Then in response we got people like Boston Lloyd and Chris Bell and Dr. Tony Hughes pushing the boundaries because to this point steroids were seen as just drugs, as a topic to be banned for discussing on platforms like YouTube. But these people still experimented. Even doctors in America began channels discussing the overblown side effects of anabolic steroids. It had shifted from illicit substances in the shadows to something more acceptable and not quite so evil. Basically going from the status of something like heroin to cannabis. And then, just like everything seems to do, when these borderline topics were seen to bring in big views, the swarm attacked and slowly everyone began talking about steroids, with people coming clean about their use and the lack of harm done to them. And then, just before we are at now, channels like More Plates, More Dates and Greg Doucette began putting this topic of steroids basically on steroids. The subject of steroids was now being broadcast to millions of people in a not-so-negative light. So a lot of people will say that this is good because anabolic steroids themselves are not bad or good. It's just better to get the information out there and let people decide for themselves using it. But that's not how the algorithm works, or online marketing in general. If you watched a video related to a topic, YouTube is going to take note. If you watch the entire video, then YouTube's algorithm will mark that something about that video was attractive to you. And so it will push more videos at you with similar topics. So you eventually find your YouTube or Instagram or TikTok feed is essentially almost exclusively centered around a few main subjects, because the system has been told that this is the content you like to watch. And content you watch is able to be monetized by adverts, and these advertisers pay YouTube for the advertising space. It's actually very difficult to find new content on YouTube because you would have to have an initial idea of what it is you wanted to search for in order to find it, and that idea will always be based off your previous interests or knowledge. So as you all know, PEDs and anabolic steroids are generally all over YouTube, although probably not for people who use it to watch videos of kittens. But if you begin to start searching for content related to sports or fitness, there's a very, very high chance that you'll stumble across a video on PEDs, which is why people put these videos out, just like this one really. And then once you're brought into that circle, YouTube quite quickly forms a funnel of content until 99% of your feed has some relation to drugs. And after that, it is very difficult to break out of. It's very similar to an addiction, really. But what's my point? Well, the problem is that this funneling massively skews the framework which anybody interested in sports or fitness seriously can see the world through. The content you see is going to be mostly either on PEDs or talking about PEDs. Of course, the PEDs themselves are not bad per se, but the way the world of content works makes it difficult to break free of the concept that sport equals steroids, which it mostly does now. But for the average person, seeing all of these genetic freaks then enhanced to extreme levels and doing extraordinary things, well, before that would have been extreme and extraordinary, they would have been freaks of nature. But now they are all you see in regards to fitness. Your average YouTube fitness advisor is likely running at least something, just to make them stand out and appear reputable. Because who wants to listen to some overweight 50-year-old tell you the best way to do bicep curls, when you could see a 6% body fat, 100 kilograms 16-year-old tell you to do the same thing? Especially if you yourself are 16 years old, or at least young and impressionable. But then the young and impressionable viewer thinks to themselves, all of these people talking at me and a lot of people in the gym are 6% body fat, 100 kilograms. Why aren't I? And what's the answer to that? Well, clearly you are slacking, you're not dieting hard enough, you're not training properly or with enough effort. If you did just another set, then maybe you could be an IFBB Pro too. But IFBB Pros are all on gear, so I guess I need to be too. So you can hopefully see how this media onslaught skews people's perception until the whole world equals whatever topic they show interest in. And this is not only a phenomena of media, this is how the mind works. Once a thing is understood to be positive, then that thing is then sought out in preference to things understood to be negative. It does sound very simple and obvious, but this slow trickle of positive feedback loops, while beneficial in living quote-unquote good lives, is also the same formula that grows and feeds addictions and ideologies. The difference there mainly lies in what exactly we fix our addictions and ideologies onto, and this of course has some element of genetic predisposition. So it isn't fair to everyone or anyone, but the system is otherwise about the same. You could addict your way to a CEO baller status with a 10-figure income because you are addicted to working harder and smarter and more ruthlessly than 99% of the world. Or that same feedback loop might turn to fitness or computer science or writing. It could be anything. So yes, in response to Rob, the problem I see is not particularly the drugs in sports, but the way people think and see the world is very easily manipulated. And people do manipulate it, even if done unconsciously. But I think we all mostly think a lot of people do it quite consciously, so it is an issue. I say we, but really you and me can't do much to change things at this point, but in theory at least, someone could try and change things, but I just don't see how that can happen. So I don't know. If you have any thoughts or comments or ideas for solutions or disagreements, then please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, make sure to like and subscribe to try and spread this discussion. Maybe we can try and get this topic at least partially to the level of steroids themselves, so that people have a, as you would expect, more balanced display of information. Not only the positive attributes of steroids, not only the negative attributes of steroids, but the intermediary discussion between the 2 points. So I'll see you next time.